Aphoristic appendage to On Truthtelling. 801 to 850. 801. When one is conservative, one runs the risk of being labeled insensitive. When liberal, insincere. 802. Whatever is controversial or contended at the national and international levels usually plays itself out much more in word than deed. However, it's generally of a sufficiently rough and threatening nature that whatever ends up resorting to force on a grand scale is often hard to predict and on us before we know it. 803. Politics is the art of publicly declaring one's virtues and the opponent's vices and then multiplying each tenfold. 804. When a leader is surrounded by people telling him what he's doing is right while, in the eyes of many others, what he's doing is wrong, all their opposition to him, if it doesn't threaten the corridors of power, is mere background noise. 805. Birth is messy, death is ugly, and in between it's trying to work it out not only for the best, but the brightest, the most beautiful, the most hopeful, the most exalted, the most intoxicating, the most adventurous, the most noble, the most just, the most. 806. No matter what the principle or ideal, if driven to an extreme, it will end up being a caricature of itself. 807. When large financial interests are at stake, moral principles suddenly have a way of becoming flexible and open to interpretation. 808. Just as there is a collective morality that is essential to the largely non-material needs and interests of a community or country, so there is a collective immorality that cannot be distinguished from its material ones. The greatest evidence of this is the general approval given to launching a war that, though it be thinly disguised as moral and just, is bent on acquiring other people's lands and riches. 809. Political commentary tends to degenerate on both sides of an ideological divide in such a manner that minor wrongs end up getting as much play as major ones. 810. The great religions have operated and flourished by banning the values of the material world from their liturgies and devotions while smuggling them back in as empire building. Institutionally and collectively speaking, heaven and mammon have always been yoked in practice while divorced in principle. 811. The invaders came to the land but didn't put the people to the sword, and some say this was humane. Others say it was simply the decision not to kill the cow but to milk it. 812. In politics as elsewhere, having sharp eyes for injustice rarely goes without a matching myopia. Much depends on where one sits and what one's sensibilities are. 813. It's certain that 1,000 years from now, if humanity survives, very few people will care about the issues and events that we care about or claim to care about except those of the most general sort. 814. Reasoning of a politician: if it serves the greater good, what do a few lies along the way matter? 815. If we actually lived our youth as pure and wholesome as it often seems to be or is portrayed as being, few would live beyond it. 816. The willingness of a person to criticize others is quite often a good indicator of his aversion to self-criticism. 817. It seems that, to some extent or other, we all love to feel morally outraged at someone or something. 818. In the matter of how we come to act as we do and be as we are, the roles and positions we assume in life play a far greater part than we care to admit. 819. The easiest thing in the world is to adopt a moral position when there is both immediate and long-term gain. The hardest is when there is neither of these. 820. Politics at its worst besides war is war, name-calling, treachery, deceitfulness, and throwing as much mud as one can. But, unfortunately for both politics and politicians, at least insofar as their self-image is concerned, most people like to watch this. 821. Truth is highly valued in politics when it makes up a winning hand. Its value soon drops when it doesn't. 822. When the media becomes more propagandistic than informative, it's a sure sign the political has become an important factor and is either in line with or superior to the profit motive. 823. Every simplification is complicated as local possibility, emanating from global impossibility. 824. You may grow old and, indeed, very old, but for all those who haven't seen or heard of you for many years, you died young. 825. A pure life. An absolutely pure life. Yes, that's been imagined. How powerfully it's been imagined. 826. A virtue that wants to shine so as to shame others ends up not only sinning but sullying itself. 827. Let's not fool ourselves. When it comes to war and, specifically, the killing of the enemy, losing one's humanity is not a thing condemned but rather excused and even honored. 828. A. Life's rough, no matter what we achieve. B. You sound like someone at the end of a life and not somebody who's starting off. A. Quite right, and no doubt my sentiment has been the swan song of a good many others. 829. One should be careful what habits one cultivates in life. God knows what tyrants they can turn out to be. 830. In some instances, being a victim simply means adopting the moral high ground while undermining it with malice. 831. The will to the greatest good and highest truths are forever collaborating and compromising so as not to impede each other. 832. The news media presents itself as being fair, balanced, and objective, but if in fact it's become superficial, selective, and slanderous, how much of its soul has it sold to gain the world? 833. Every day we start over our life under conditions that, however routine, incrementally change and are never quite the same. 834. Living from day to day is the greatest habit of all and, if it took an act of will to break it, we would live forever. 835. Dying is much easier when living has become most difficult. 836. It's a rather frightening thing that people who can be nicest can also be nastiest. 837. Say all you want about politeness. Say all you want about political correctness. Say all you want about showing respect to others. None of this will, in the heat of the moment, prevent most people from losing it. 838. Being a politician and an excellent speaker often mean being able to speak truthfully and falsely with equal conviction. 839. Young love. When it's on, nothing surpasses it. 840. Perhaps no public or political discourse is more frequently dishonest than the one of assessing the enemy. 841. Party politics falls short of being principled whenever it must be tactical or strategic, which is most of the time. 842. When a politician keeps on making the same point over and over, there is the risk that, no matter how well received it is, he will still sound like a politician. 843. A. I don't understand myself and I don't understand the world. B. But you've lived a long life. A. Let me rephrase that. I understand neither myself nor the world completely. B. But how could it be otherwise? A. Well, I can dream, can't I? 844. A. It's a sort of blasphemy to say it, but evil makes the world more exciting and interesting. B. Perhaps for those who don't suffer from it. Who even enjoy the suffering of others. God damn it, what are you saying? A. I'm sorry, did I offend you? B. As a rape victim, I should be offended. A. You're perfectly right. My truth isn't for all ears. 845. Why is romantic love both so sweet and so bitter? Because it's the idealization of the other who must eventually fall short. 846. Perhaps the greatest folly of youth is its transience. It should have enough sense to stay where it is. 847. Perhaps one of the greatest benefits of age is having time to ponder one's youth, which is something one didn't have when one lived it. 848. The paradox of militarism is that the pomp and pride of the parade square blind everyone to the pathos and horror of war. Not once but over and over. 849. With respect to the mores of a particular society, especially one of most recent vintage, there is always a gap between the public discourse about them and the way they are received by people in general. It is the lag or play in this area that, along with a multitude of factors, allows things to go down a particular path of development or slow down, stop, and even be reversed. In relation to a variety of conditions and circumstances, these two possibilities can lead to two others, namely, all moral change or development flowing about us like a meandering river or hitting us like a flash flood. 850. There will never be a change in the way we do politics unless there is a corresponding change in society. It boils down to the fact that politicians will never stop lying to us until we become far more unwilling to accept, promote, believe, parrot, celebrate, and welcome them.